Hello artists, it's Miss Munger. Today I'm going to show you how to make a terrarium. So in my last video, I reminded everybody to look for a glass jar at their house that they could use to make a terrarium, or a clear plastic container. If you weren't able to find one, don't worry, this is just a project idea and you can always work on a different project today for art class. Okay. I want to show you this terrarium that I've already made and sort of the layers that go into creating a terrarium. So I wanted to show you that the very bottom of this terrarium has some rocks in it. Then there's a little layer of soil, and then there is some moss in this terrarium. And the lid is on this terrarium, and I've actually had this terrarium for a few years. The moss will live for a long time if you keep the lid sealed, if you put a little water in it and seal it. The terrarium's like a little mini ecosystem, meaning that the moss inside of it, or the plant inside of it, recycles the nutrients and the water that is in the terrarium. So what you're gonna do to get started is you are going to go for a walk and find some materials outside. I actually recommend making your terrarium outside. That would be a way to do it that wouldn't be messy. I've gone ahead and brought my materials inside so I could record this video. If you are gonna make your terrarium inside, I suggest putting down some newspaper like I have on my table, so you don't get soil on your work area, and it is a lot easier to clean up if you have newspaper down. So you're going to start with your empty jar, and I'm gonna tell you some things to look for when you go for your walk outside. The first thing you're gonna look for to put into your jar are some little pebbles or some small rocks. So I have some that I collected outside, because your first layer of your terrarium is the draining layer. So if you put some rocks in the bottom, it'll help. If there's extra water, it'll help your terrarium drain. So I have a few rocks in the bottom. The next thing you would look for on your walk outside when you're making your terrarium is some loose dirt or soil that you can put in your terrarium. Okay, that looks pretty good. So I don't want to fill up my terrarium all the way with soil, because I want to leave enough room for me to put the things I want in my terrarium on top. So here's my jar, and my soil goes to about here, so it's not quite halfway up my jar. It's maybe more like a third of the way with the soil. Okay, so the next part is putting things inside your terrarium. This is the fun part. So I'm gonna show you a few things I collected on my walk outside that I wanna put in my terrarium. So when I was going for my walk today looking for things to put in my terrarium jar, these are some of the things I found. So I found a stick that I thought I might be able to break up and add into my soil layer. Moss really likes to grow on pieces of dead wood. So you could add some pieces of a stick into your terrarium. You could also add for example, like a pine cone, acorns, anything like that. And one thing that does really well in terrariums, if you want your terrarium to stay living, is to find some wood that has some moss growing on it. If you live somewhere near the woods, you might be able to find moss more easily. If you can't find moss and you decide you'd like to put something living in your terrarium, you could go ahead and dig a little bit of grass up. Just make sure if you are digging up a plant, you get the roots of the grass to put into the soil, if you would like to do that. Or you can go ahead and just find really interesting, fun things on the ground to put in your terrarium. So for example, I could go ahead and put these pine needles in my terrarium, and they sort of look like little trees, and that would be really fun and interesting. So use your imagination. I found some lichen outside that I might put in my terrarium. And now this is the really fun creative part. Once you are outside and you're looking around nature and seeing what's around you, then once you have this layer of some pebbles and some loose soil. Now this is the part where you get to build your mini world inside your terrarium jar. Okay, there we go. I wanted to give you one more hint, helpful hint. If you have a jar that you're using that has a narrow mouth and you can't fit your hand inside to put things inside, don't worry. You could go ahead and find the things you would like to put in your terrarium, and you can use a stick from outside, sort of like your hand, where you could push things into place through the mouth of your jar with a stick. So that is a helpful tip if you have a jar with a narrow opening on top. So here is my arrangement. I have some nice sticks, I have some pine needles, some of the moss and lichens I've collected, an acorn. And at this point, I think my terrarium is done. So I'm gonna add a little bit of water into my terrarium by simply going to my sink inside my house. This would be the time where if you were outside, you could now bring your terrarium inside. It's not messy anymore. And you could get a little bit of water, put a little bit of water on your fingers and just flick a little bit of moisture into your terrarium. Again, you probably don't want to put your jar under the sink and turn on the tap, because you might put way too much water in your terrarium. Your terrarium doesn't need that much water. Go ahead and put the lid on. And there you go. Your terrarium is now its own little ecosystem. If your terrarium seems like it does need some more water at some point, you could go ahead and open the lid and mist in a little bit more water, flick in a little bit of extra water with your fingers. But once you get the moisture level right, your terrarium should go on and live for a while. So I'll be interested to see how long your moss lives in your terrarium, but hopefully it'll be like this terrarium that I've had for a long time, and the moss will just keep growing inside its little ecosystem. Happy art making. I hope you have a lot of fun with this terrarium building project.